Good morning, everyone. Today is my birthday. Can you believe it? No. Thank you. It is not why I announced that, but thank you. Birthdays are interesting, aren't they? When we are little, we love our birthdays. When we get older, we sort of begin to dread our birthdays. But when you are my age, birthdays are often times of reflection, times of evaluation. We tend to look back on the past year of our life, and we think of all the things that have happened. Every year we want to feel that our life is better than last year, that we've accomplished more things, that we've achieved milestones. On our birthdays, we tend to look back on the successes and the failures that have occurred in the past year of our lives. And while we might think this is a healthy practice, this is actually not the best way to look at our lives. Even when reflecting on good things or successes, we can build up our egos, our self-righteousness. And of course, dwelling on failures is no good either, as this drags us into a pessimistic view on our lives. Instead of thinking about our own successes and failures, we would do much better to reflect on our lives by looking back and seeing how God has blessed our lives. What new things did He bring to us in this past year? How are our lives different thanks to Him? What things would not have been possible without Him in our lives? Even when reflecting on difficulties or things we might consider failures, we can see how God has either carried us through these rough patches or brought healing to us when we needed it. This year, in the days leading up to my birthday, I decided to take this approach in looking at the past year of my life in terms of blessings, and I found that I was quite amazed in the ways that God has impacted my life. Looking back on just this past year alone, it is clear to see how His hand has shaped and changed my life for the better. I won't share with you the specifics of the things that I've noticed God has done for me, because that's not what is important. Instead, I will ask you all to truly and deeply think about the ways God has blessed you just this past year. I think all of you will also realize many amazing things that God has brought about for you in each of your own lives. Yes, God does so much for us. He does even more than we realize. No matter how much we reflect and how many blessings we count, He has done even more than those things that we are aware of. But what do we do for Him? I think you will find that the relationship between God and people is rather lopsided. Every good thing in our life comes from Him, but how quickly we are to forget this. How quick we are to credit ourselves for all the good things in our lives. These good things are our successes, and we want more of our successes each and every year. In today's gospel passage, we hear the timeless words from Jesus Christ, "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." What does it mean to deny ourselves? Denying ourselves is to chip away at our egos, to stop glorifying our own accomplishments and acknowledging God in our lives. How subtly self-righteousness can sneak into our lives. Sometimes it cleverly disguises itself in forms that are not quite so apparent as self-righteousness can be. When we are self-concerned, when we practice self-justification, when we act on self-desire, when we follow paths that are self-created and self-directed, In fact, anytime the word self can be used in a description of something we are doing, we are dancing to a dangerous drummer known as self-love. Even things that are praised in our society, like self-motivation, self-assertiveness, and self-development, can present deceptive stumbling blocks to anyone who truly longs to deny themselves and to join themselves in a life to God. But the easiest way to defend against this terrible trap of self-love or self-righteousness is to practice gratitude towards God, to give thanks for all that He has done and for all that He will do for us. Last Tuesday, we celebrated Divine Liturgy for the Feast of the Elevation of the Holy Cross. After liturgy, a man who had come to church with his wife that day told me that 51 years ago, on September 14th, which is the feast day of the cross, there was a situation in which he knew that God specifically and purposely protected and guarded one of his children. And so, for every year, for 51 years since the day of that event, this man and his wife come to church on the feast day of the Holy Cross to thank God for protecting and watching over their child those 51 years ago. This is what it looks like to acknowledge God's action in your life. How easy it is for us, after a great relief, to be thankful for a moment and then simply continue moving on to worry about the next difficulty or to even celebrate the next success. When we realize all that God does for us, perhaps we will be inspired to do more for Him, to do more for His church. Too often, we look at how we can squeeze the church into our lives instead of seeing how we can organize our lives around the church. As you know, before I was the pastoral assistant here at the cathedral, I worked with my dad, Father Dino Papademos, at his church in Elk Grove. And regularly, people would stop by the church or either call to ask Father Dino for advice, as people often do with priests. One day, the phone rang at the church, and I answered to hear a person crying on the other end. And this person asked, "Can I please speak with Father Dino?" So I quickly transferred them over. And I heard Father Dino encourage a rather peculiar suggestion to this caller. Father Dino encouraged this caller to simply try to come to church every Sunday for 1 year. And as I heard this, I thought to myself, now this is kind of strange advice. So when he was done, I asked him, "Why might you advise someone to come to church every Sunday for 1 year?" He told me. The caller had felt that nothing was going right in their life. They had felt that their life had become a mess, so much so that they were beyond help, beyond improvement. He said for someone to come to church every Sunday for an entire year requires a complete shift in life prioritization. He said, unfortunately, people prioritize their lives around things that do not matter so much, on things that do not improve their lives, and unfortunately, sometimes on things that hinder their lives. By making the church a priority in our lives, we connect to Christ. We experience His love. We feel God in our lives, and only then can our lives truly improve. This is what Christ means today when He tells us, "For whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? For what can man give in return for his life?" It is not easy to follow Christ, to prioritize the church. It requires action. It requires doing something. It requires taking up our cross and thinking of ourselves less. But when we do this, we find relief. We find peace. We find hope in the many blessings that might otherwise go unnoticed. We can see God in every success. We can feel Him with us in every failure. When we follow Christ, the pressure to keep building a better and better life is alleviated, knowing that good things come from Him and Him alone. Let us use today to think about what God has done in our lives. When we realize what He has done for us, perhaps we will begin to do more for Him, more for His church. The more we build up His church, the more He is with us in this world, a world which so desperately needs Him. Amen.